We've worked hard, banded together, fought for something, and made history many times. We've gotten this far because together we are tireless. Tireless doesn't mean we don't get tired. It means we help each other continue on. And knowing one voice is strong, but the power of thousands or millions is stronger. Tireless takes a stand together, and we won't rest until all of Canada is with us. We are the Tireless, and together we will achieve gender equality.
So I just love that movie. Every time I see it, it inspires me. So inspiring. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Women's Foundation Black Women Author Voices. And do I ever have some Black women authors for you tonight? I'm just so thrilled that they've joined us. My name is Paulette Senior. I'm President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation, and I'm so excited that these incredible women have joined us and that all of you have taken time out of your day to join us as well. First, let me begin our discussion this evening. But before I do that, I just want to take an important moment to acknowledge that the work we do and the programs we support take place on First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous lands throughout Canada. We are grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation, to meet and greet on this land, and are committed to pursuing truth, reconciliation, and decolonization, and true authentic allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. I'm also pretty grateful as well to my ancestors, to all our ancestors, for the fact that we have journeyed to this particular point in conversation today, particularly as it is Black History Month, and it's because of them why we are here. And so because of that, we are going to be having this conversation. It's been 30 years that the Canadian Women's Foundation has been Canada's only public foundation for gender equality. We support diverse women, girls, and gender diverse folks to move out of poverty, out of violence, and into confidence and leadership. We support grassroots solutions to gender injustice in every region throughout the country. We support systemic systems change to build gender justice. We work to mobilize people like you who have joined us tonight to build a better Canada for all of us. And in the words of one of our founding mothers, the late, great Rosemary Brown, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. So let's get going. The voices, activism, and stories of Black, Indigenous, and racialized women, girls, and gender diverse people are crucial to meaningful change. When we support them, what we're doing is that we're building everyone up. We're building a better society for everyone. And that's why we're marking this particular Black History Month and our upcoming International Women's Day with these amazing 4 authors that I'm so excited to talk with this evening. So let me take a moment to introduce them. Jael Richardson, author of Gutter Child, maybe you can give a little wave. Francesca Ekwuyasi. Francesca is author of Butter, Honey, Pig, Bread. Eternity Martis, author of They Said This Would Be Fun, Race, Campus Life, and Growing Up. And Zalika Reid-Benta, author of Frying Plantain. So these are the 4 incredible women that I'll be having this conversation with. And thank you all of you for joining us. I also invite you throughout this conversation and beyond to visit CanadianWomen.org, Tireless Readers Collective. You'll be able to enter a draw to win prize of these women's books. All 4 books you'll be able to win after the live stream. And post your questions. I invite you to post your questions during the live stream below, and we'll be able to get to them later. So let's move right into it. Let's kick it off. First, maybe the first question should be to all of you. And I want you to broadly talk about, how does your approach to writing connect to matters of justice? So that's the first question. And Zalika, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think for me personally, when I think about matters of justice and my writing, I think about the justice of portraying Black characters and portraying Black narratives, because Black storytellers should be able to tell our own stories. And I think about the contribution to a diversity of Black narratives. Like even this panel, as we were talking about before, there's a diversity of writing here. Like there's nonfiction, there's fiction, there's experimental fiction, there's things that take place in different countries and everything like that. And so I think for me, I just want to be able to contribute to that. I want to be able to create fiction that expands the scope of what it means to be Black and what it means to be a person. And so that's how I think about it in terms of justice.
Thank you. Thank you. Jael, do you want to go next?
Sure. So for me, I think I started in nonfiction and did a children's book, and now I've written my first novel. And so for me, my concept of justice is about storytelling and the importance of telling stories and remembering stories and upholding stories. I don't think it really matters what format you're writing in or what form you're using. I think it's about making sure our stories are documented, that our stories are shared, that our stories reach our own community as well as other communities. And I think I saw from the transition from nonfiction to fiction that there was more similarity than I thought. I thought they were very different, distinct things. And while the kind of beginning point is different, you have your content for nonfiction and you don't have anything, especially in a dystopia. For me, it was about being honest to the stories that were coming to me and finishing those stories and giving them away, and that was my act of social justice, that people, by reading them, would remember the people, the characters, the stories, and maybe would look at their own lives and their own relationships differently.
Thank you for that. And it's becoming quite clear in the work for justice that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that we can actually use. Eternity.
Yeah, my concept of justice is very similar to Jael's. And I think for me, I come from it from now as an author, but also as a journalist. And I think that when we talk about justice in a journalism sense, there's this real fear of what justice means. So for me, justice in writing the book was putting my voice down, putting it into the public record and making it known when often people who look like us don't get a chance to do that. And for me, the justice in that was that I was able to write this book because of the books and the stories that came before, to preserve us, to make us seen. And so to me, justice is very much about being seen and having the space to write it down. And for some of us, it's in here, it's writing it down and it's in a book. For others, it's talking about it and just preserving the power of storytelling for cultures, for values, for traditions, and for us as Black women.
Thank you. And I really hear the importance of giving voice to the experiences, because otherwise they remain silent. And finally, Francesca.
Yeah, so I think everyone has said pretty much everything on my mind. And I appreciate that. But I'm really interested in writing like real people, like real human beings, even when they're not human beings, just kind of realistic experiences. And something I think about is Martine Sims, who is this incredible African-American artist and writer. She wrote the Mundane Afrofuturism Manifesto. And basically it's saying if we're writing Afrofuturism, I guess the challenge is to write from a point of truth. So like anything we write about the future has to kind of exist within the context of like current history. And so if you're writing about real people and real lives, even if it's like speculative, I I choose to write it within this timeline where transatlantic slave trade has happened, and oppression is real, and ableism is rampant. And so I want my writing to reflect reality, even if it's a more hopeful or optimistic reality. But I want it to be honest. And in doing that, like, we have to be honest about the world, which is like, there's so much injustice.
Right.
So I want to write the truth. Which is basically the same thing everyone else said.
Yeah, but you thrown in some other words there, like Afrofuturism and telling truth and realistic but optimistic at the same time. So I love all of that. Thank you. So we know the pandemic has set progress behind, and if you didn't know how far behind, actually 3 decades behind. So that's pretty stark. And when you look at it from an intersectional lens, for example, even with those gains, we know not everyone had actually gained 30 years before it was lost. So Black women, Indigenous women, women with disabilities, women who live on low incomes, for example, have faced many such barriers, which are worse off now as a result of the impact of the pandemic. So Eternity, you actually address some of these issues in your writing, in your journalistic approach. Can you share with us what you think needs to happen to bring more of these hidden dynamics and stories to the surface, and how can it lead to systemic change?
Yeah, so I think, and I think it's really understated, but I think the fact that these stories, and there are journalists who put these stories out there, and so that they make them known, is probably one of the most important things we can do. Because when we look at the pandemic and what's happening, we're seeing a little bit of what's happening. We're not seeing women are leaving the workforce. Working moms are now just at home. They're not able to, not working moms, women in the workforce are moms or not working moms, but they're at home. Violence has hit an all-time high, their epidemic. And so to me, it's important to kind of look at aspects when we talk about, for example, we're not talking about young women who are on campus right now or are stuck at home with their abusers, or the ways in which the economy right now, because young people can't afford a house or they've lost their jobs, they're living with abusers. So I wanted to look at that. I wanted to look at maternal mortality rates, which are incredibly high in the US. We don't have the same numbers in Canada, but it's also quite high. And what it means to be a Black mom who's expecting during COVID. And I spoke to so many moms who were so worried that their children would be taken away from them because they may have COVID, or they may be placed in care. And that's a real concern. And so I think tell stories and have people who are able to kind of see, these matter too. Everything else going on in the pandemic matters. So these stories, and so do the intersections of what to be a woman of color during this period is really important. And so I think that's the only way we can make it known. And the thing with that, I'm never able to tell people what to think, but I can them think about, and I can give them the story, and I can give them the narrative so they can make their own choices. And one part that's really important for me, because journalism is all about showing a problem, right? Like we talk about the problem and then we leave it. But I like to think about journalism for people of color as solutions journalism and movement journalism. So instead of just talking about the problem, what are some solutions? How can we fix this? Let's look at bigger social issues. And in doing that, people of color also, especially women of color, they're empowered to make decisions because of the information. And I think the way when we're working in the framework that we have of systemic oppression, when we have the skills or we give people the skills to act, then that's the most important thing we can do.
I love your answer, because it really gets to the heart of the importance of telling not just the story, but the reality of people's lives, what they're actually facing. And usually in journalism, a lot of these stories are hidden or remain silent. So actually making them visible is really important in order for it to be surfaced, and the focus on solutions. So we could really go on with that answer, but thank you. Thank you for that. So in your recent interview with Broadview, Jael, you said it wasn't until, I want to quote you, probably I'm going to read this, okay? It wasn't until I was working on Gutter Child that I started thinking about the fact that my ancestors were indigenous to the land that they were on. And there were kings and there were queens and there were tribal leaders and there were politicians. But the history I spent my entire life hearing was slavery, 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 end of quote. So can you share more about addressing this particular challenge in your writing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm always a bit embarrassed by my lack of knowledge and my lack of awareness in these issues. But growing up, when it was Black History Month, all we talked about was slavery and emancipation and Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. And so I had this really quite narrow, short lens on history. And I only kind of understood because my ancestors are all American. I only understood the part of the story where we arrived in America. And when I was working on Gutter Child, which is a dystopia, it's set in an imagined world in which gutter folks have been sent into this particular part of land and they have to pay off a debt in order to get out. And one of the things that happens, of course, in a dystopia is you have to figure out, why did this happen? What's the backstory? And I had to give what people call an origin story. You know, how did this land come to be this way? And I really wanted to address colonialism and sort of the way colonialism has impacted the Black community in particular. And I realized, first of all, that I didn't have a backstory to pull from. There's not a country in Africa or anywhere in the world that I know for sure that my ancestors are from, because that history's been lost and stolen and taken. And on top of that, when I realized this, of course, I knew that part. But when I started to think about the fact that, like, there is a whole history on the other side of the ocean that my ancestors have lived and been through, in which they were not slaves and they were not stolen and they were not, they were home. It really excited me to create a backstory for the book and for the characters, where I was able to imagine who we are and what values and characteristics, in this case, I call them soci people, brought with them, and what values and ways they were going to pass down generation to generation. And I sort of was able to create a story in which slavery was not part of the situation. And well, not at least in the same way. And I think for me, that was a really powerful exercise to understand who I am. And it's something I'm really passionate about thinking about and talking about more and more with Black Canadians in particular, about the fact that we don't learn about the history of kings in the 50 plus African countries. We learn about the kings in England, and we learn about French and the Italian and all these sorts of historical leaders. But we are very much limited in what we have access to naturally in the school system about Africa and about the countries in Africa. And I really want to, for my own self, I want to push that conversation further in my own life. I want to share that with my son. I want to really do a better job of providing a more fulsome history of who we are as a people.
What a beautiful answer. You know, as I read your book, I was really thinking about trying to imagine the land. That's where my mind was going. I was trying to imagine the land that this all was occurring on. And I was going back and forth because it's almost like somewhat past, but also futuristic, all combined.
Yeah.
And you set my mind like a flight. It was very cool. But thank you for that, and thank you for explaining that and using that kind of imaginative kind of writing to create an existence that wasn't just based in slavery. That's that's not what we're used to. And so I think that your answer leads into the next question that I have for all of you, which is about sharing with us your thoughts on the framing of Black histories, Black presence, Black futures, and what do you think needs to change in terms of all of that? And I was particularly looking forward to this question because of the response that Francesca gave earlier around now I can't even say the word, but like a futurist kind of
Afrofuturism.
Afrofuturism, yeah. So maybe Francesca, you can start.
So the question is about like what we're looking for to read.
How do you think the framing of Black history's presence and futures need to change?
Well, I don't know that they need to change necessarily. I think that more Black people just need to tell Black stories, and I think that happens. And I say this like fully recognizing that like I'm an immigrant to Canada from Nigeria, and unlike a lot of like my African Canadian, African American friends who aren't necessarily immigrants in the sense that they're like second generation or so, it's a different story. Like I know my ancestry for, it goes back quite a while, and I know it because I was born and raised on the continent that, my land, my homeland. But, in Nigeria, on the continent, in the Caribbean, like Black people are telling Black stories. And so my thoughts around that is, I guess, I'm not envisioning a non-Black audience necessarily. And so I just think, more Black people tell more Black stories, pretty much. And there needs to be like a diversity of those stories because we're not like one. We're not
right. Yes, I appreciate that because there could be multiple histories, multiple presents, and multiple futures. I get that.
There are like 100%. So I guess my trying to frame my positioning is to be clear that I can't speak for any. I can't speak for people. I can speak for me.
We don't just have one Black history. So true, so true. What about you, Eternity?
For me, I think I would agree. I think telling Black stories is important. I think in storytelling we preserve the current generations and future generations. But I think also we need to be thinking about just how expansive, how large the Black community is. And I had this come up in the class I was teaching last semester, where a lot of my students didn't even recognize how diverse Black people are. That you can, you can be Black and Muslim, for example, or you can be, just all these different types, you can be Black and Afro-Latino. And there's all these different types of cultures that are kind of blending together. And in our country, I think that we're going towards a place where the Black future will also include a lot of Black multiracial people like myself. Or just we're looking back at our DNA and our ancestry, not on DNA or 23andMe, but we're looking back in other ways that people don't steal our DNA, and see that like just how multicultural we really are. And so when I was writing my book, I was always really afraid that I'm writing this book about being Black and having an experience as a Black woman, but I'm also South Asian. But I think that there are so many people who have that experience. And I think it's one that I think as we go forward, Black futures will include that we recognize that there isn't just one type of Black person. There are so many of us around the world, and we're all very, very different.
I love your answer because it made me think of an article I read earlier this week about a Black Inuk woman whose father is Jamaican, her mother is Inuit, and her coming to not just terms, but coming to her identity as both, and embracing the part of her that she hasn't, which is being Black as well, and that's also part of her history and future and present. And Zalika, what are your thoughts?
I think it's basically a combination of what Eternity and Francesca are saying, because there is a diversity of the Black experience, there is a diversity of Black people, and so in order to frame our histories and our futures and our present, it is basically just telling our own stories and framing our own stories in the best way that we know how. So for me, when I was writing Frying Plantain, I was like, okay, I'm not speaking for all Black people in Canada. I'm not even speaking for all Jamaican Canadians in Canada, but I'm speaking about one particular experience. And and sort of, in a way, the history in that particular time of Toronto through that one experience. And so, so basically just having different people writing their own different experiences and being able to share that with society, with other readers, with people, so you can see that there is this multitude and there is this great diversity. And of course that means, you know, that Black writers are going to come across systemic barriers in terms of getting those stories out. But I think that because there's such a wealth of storytelling in our community, and there's definitely a wealth of Black books in Canada, that's just what the framing is. It's being, you know, kind of like the protagonist in your own story, and by being the protagonist in your own story, other people can relate to that, and that's how histories and futures can be shared.
Mm-hmm. And I was sharing with you earlier, lovingly, how much I do enjoy frying some plantain, which I probably do almost every day. But what I really appreciated about your book was, and exactly what you're saying, it's a specific place and time of a particular story. And then people can actually, there are lots of people that can identify. And I think it goes back to the question of, it is about the framing of Black histories, and that it's actually Black Histories Month, not just Black History Month, right? And so it's an opportunity to tell many histories because of all the different experiences and exposures that we've had as Black people from the various places that we have existed, pre-post slavery, and pre-post colonialism as well. That's also a part of our history. So thank you for that. So Francesca, we can't let you go without collectively congratulating you on the selection of your book for CBC Canada Reads. It's just, we feel like it's all of us who won this, but it is you, and we're just particularly pleased that it's you and that you will be featured on Canada. I listen to it every year on CBC, so that's amazing. So I want to quote something that you said, and then I'm going to follow it up with a question. So I'm just going to read it to make sure I don't misquote you. You said, "I want to be accessible, but without pandering to whiteness or the Eurocentric gaze. A lot of literature, as I read as a kid, I often had no idea what they were talking about. It was often alienating. It's important for me to find that balance. So I'm curious about that balance and how you have found it in your work and how you do it."
I think I've been incredibly lucky in terms of I've been, you know, my short stories and essays have been published by like lit journals that are really interested in like challenging the status quo. So, for example, some essays I've written for Guts magazine, and even fiction. And Guts magazine no longer exists really, but I love them. They're an online feminist magazine, and I don't italicize or translate non-English words if I'm writing a Nigerian character. And so the point is to be honest and authentic, but also recognizing that like non-Nigerians might be reading this, and I want them to understand it. And so I guess explaining non-English words or colloquial terms or colloquial concepts in context is one way I try to make my writing accessible to people who aren't like in my head, or who aren't like from my specific culture or family, because I think it's important. Like I mean, like reading is my favorite thing. Like as a kid, it's kind of what gave me hope and excitement, and like fed my imagination, even when I didn't understand. But it just feels so much better when I do understand. Like when I read when I started reading Nigerian literature, like contemporary Nigerian fiction about like my neighborhood or about just things locations I could place myself into, it's really powerful. So I want to be that kind of writer. But because, I'm an immigrant to Canada and the world is what it is, I don't want to, because you can tell when you read something and it's over explained. Like it's very clear. I don't want to do that. Because it's like not really fair to myself, but it's not fair to readers either. Like people don't always need to be spoon fed. Reading doesn't always have to be like butter. Sometimes learning or grappling with the language or the concept or doing research even a legitimate way to engage with the story. I wanted to be able to do that, and I'm grateful that it resonates with some people. That's my fear, is that one will get it. Yeah.
That's a lot to think of in terms of balancing. It's really trying to get to that spot where folks can see themselves in it. Yeah. Right? And I like your idea of not over explaining, because then you've given everything away, and what work are we doing as we're going along with the story. So thank you. And I'm wondering about the rest of you as well. Have you found balance, and how do you find that in your work? Jael, can I start with you?
Sure. I was pondering and hoping I wasn't first. I think one of the things I often struggle with, especially in writing a dystopia, I think there was a question about how much to explain from the back end, but there was also, for me, a question of honesty in terms of who was going to narrate the story and what was going to be the best way into the world. And so in Gutter Child, it's actually narrated by, she's 14, Elamina Dubois, when she starts. And for me, she's a character who was removed from the gutter when she was young and is now kind of coming back through a series of events and has to navigate this world and learn the truth about what's happened to her and what's happening to people like her. And so for me, the balance was about recognizing what the story required and who was the best person to tell the story and in what voice. I think Canadian literature has once been known for flourishes and fancy things and long descriptions of places, and that's the kind of work that's been celebrated. And I think for me, when I tell a story, I have to think about what's honest and true and best for the story, even if people then call it simple or young adult in some sort of way meant to insult, which it's not an insult to me. I think one of the things, I was talking to Suvankam Themavongsa, who won the Giller, and she was saying how, and it's something that I've taken away from our conversation, she wanted to create stories that a young person could read with an extremely intelligent adult, and that it would be an experience together. And I think that for me is what I try and do with my writing, that creates balance. It's work that's not exclusive to a certain level of knowledge or a certain kind of reading background or a certain worldview. It's about people being able to read it together, even as a family or as young people reading with a teacher. And all of them can get something out of it and can pull things out that might be relevant. And so that's kind of the critical balance for me, how to share the questions I'm in pursuit of, that I've tried to maybe not answer in my books, but I've tried to approach in my stories, and to do it in such a way that multiple generations, people with multiple levels of education, can sit down and chew on it together.
The word that comes to mind as you share that is accessible. Like there's a level of accessibility that doesn't have prerequisites.
Yes.
Right?
Like
so
that.
Yeah. There you go. I'm with you. I hear you. and I'm sorry, Eterna, you didn't answer this question as yet, right?
No, me and Zalika.
Your balance. Did you want to skip it?
No, I mean, I think I have to address it. I wrote a whole book about myself.
Okay.
And it was something that came up quite a lot. How much should I say, and what is necessary, and what's in the greater good of me putting my life on the line keeping in mind, I come from a family where we don't talk about this stuff. Nobody's talking about partying. Nobody's talking about drinking. No one's talking about any of that in my family. And so how do I write a book that is true to me and respectful of everyone I've pulled into my story? And how do I go to another family event and be able to defend it? And that was a big part for me. Like, what can I defend my book? Can I defend every single word in my book, like a year from now, 10 years from now? And can I write this story in a way that's not an expose, but is true to me? And in the back end as well, there were these conversations about, well, why don't you give some more? Tell us how you feel about this, or tell us what that person said. And to me, some of the best works, or some of the best stories I've read and that I could identify with, were the ones that didn't say all that much. And I think about Alicia Elliott's A Mind Spread Out in the Ground, where she talks about her family and there's an intimacy involved, but you still don't know the whole story. And so I wanted to put up barriers around that, put up boundaries, because I think for us as writers, we're always being pushed beyond our boundaries, and represent myself in a way where I felt like I respected my own boundaries. And then when Jael was talking about families, like, that's exactly what I wanted as well. I wanted a book where, yes, I'm talking about difficult stuff and I'm talking about me, but that people could sit down and read it as a family. And I get a lot of people telling me they do. And so I think that also speaks to there's some honesty in the book, and there's some real stuff that happens to us, but we can still engage with it when it's done in a way that is accessible and is true to us. And so that was important, and so was playing with the structure. I wanted to write a book where I hated being an English major. I hated all the books I had to read, and I hated that I was bound to structure. And so I wanted to write a book where we played with structure and format, and where other people who wanted to write or enjoy that type of stuff would know it's okay to do that as well.
Thank you for that. Because you're right. When I think of your book and the story that you've told and revealed, I get that need to have some boundaries as well. But also what it makes me think about, particularly for the work we do at the Canadian Women's Foundation, is try to get ordinary, if there's such a thing, ordinary Canadians to understand the issues.
Yeah. And
to understand that if the stories aren't told, then we actually don't understand the problem, right? So whether it's the problem of gender-based violence or the problem of sexual harassment, whatever that is, and then you impose race on top of that, like, if we don't tell it in a way for people to actually get it, or even open the door to actually having those conversations within our families, among our friends, that, we don't get it. So thank you for telling your story, because it is truly your story. So Zalika, I'm going to come to you next. And because I'm really curious about, you talked about how you were hesitant to have your book in a particular setting or specific place, but then you changed your mind and you placed it within and made a connection to the Jamaican, a novel about a Jamaican Canadian girl in Toronto's Little Jamaica. The neighborhood I know well and could imagine everything as I was reading your book. I could actually see myself walking through that, being a little girl who came from Jamaica and being very familiar with Little Jamaica. So how does this reception of doing what you were hesitant to do influence you as a writer? And is it, you can tell us more about this idea of readers, particularly Black women, being seen or feeling seen in their literature, or in literature, period.
Yeah, definitely. It actually goes really well with the conversation we were just having about balance, because I think before, there were a few things that I was worried about. I didn't want to be seen as trying to write about the quote unquote blanket Black experience. I didn't want to be seen as trying to be the voice of this particular neighborhood, since as what we kept saying, there's a multitude of experiences, and there's a multitude of experiences in that neighborhood as well. And I was also thinking about balance. And I was also thinking about things like, oh, will this be accessible? And especially because when I wrote a bulk of the collection, I was not in Canada, I was in New York. And so I was getting an American perspective on something that was Canadian, and Americans were telling me what was Canadian and what wasn't Canadian, and me just having to deal with all of those different stereotypes. And then I kind of just stopped thinking about being accessible, and I stopped thinking about balance, and I just wrote what felt natural and wrote what felt right. I mean, even the whole reason why Frying Plantain came to be is because in grade 12, I did a exercise for my writer's craft class that was to describe a neighborhood, and I described Little Jamaica, and the characters came from that. So I basically wanted to go back to that. I wanted to go back to this, you know, kind of visceral writing experience I had, and realized that Little Jamaica was its own character, and realized that I was writing this character and basically Kara's relationship to this character through Kara's perspective. I'm not saying that this is everyone's experience, but this is Kara's experience. And once I got good with that, and once I realized, you know, that universality can happen through specificity, I was like good to go. And so I just decided to write it. And because I think I was more thinking about just like, this is what is authentic to Kara, and this is what is authentic to this time period, because I also spent some time of my childhood in Little Jamaica, and just things that I remembered. I think that's why it resonates with people, because they're just, because I didn't try to hold anything back anymore. So because of that, and because of I did my best to just be as honest and authentic as possible. That's why I think there are a few Black women who are saying, I feel seen. I know exactly what this is. I know what this house looks like. I know what it means when you have food full of margarine containers full of food. So they're just like, I absolutely know what that is. And that's just because I was like, yeah, I'm writing about this particular experience, and I'm not going to think about whether or not it's accessible. I'm not going to pander to anything. And the only thing I really feel like I had to do a compromise, and it took years for me to do, is that one of the characters speaks in Patwa. And so how I wrote that changed throughout the years, because first of all, I had to learn how to write it in that way. So
one of the most challenging things to read is Patois.
So I was just like, oh, okay. And so basically kind of finding a balance of how I felt like it was still authentic to what it sounded like. And also from people who are even Jamaican or non-Jamaican to read it. And so certain things had to be changed. The big thing that had to change was how I spelled Kian, because you would usually spell that Cyan, but people kept saying Cian. Like, it didn't matter who it was, they were saying Cian. So I was like, okay, well, that's something that I'm just going to have to change. And that was about like 7 years after I started writing it, where I was finally comfortable with being like, I'm changing this particular word because it's just hindering everyone's reading experience. So I think for me, it was just learning when to, like, you know, go with your gut and stick to things, even if people didn't necessarily get it, because I knew someone was going to get it, and knowing when to take the critique and be like, okay, I'm gonna change this now.
And that requires a certain level of confidence and comfort in yourself to be able to do that. And this whole idea of feeling seen, I'm wondering how all of you have actually been able to you know, take the reader's kinds of responses, and how those responses have actually influenced your own work. So maybe Francesca, I'll start with you this time.
Okay. So the only responses you mean like before, like if I'm writing a short story, feedback before publication?
Yeah, have folks' responses or readers' responses to your books influenced or influenced you or been instructive to you?
So in the writing process, yes.
Okay.
And that's like my editor and like specific people who are asked to read it.
Right.
It's very specific because I think it's important. Like I'm basically like mining my mind and hoping that like we can connect our minds and you can see what I'm trying to say. So feedback is incredible. I love feedback. My ego is no longer bound in that. Just so many rejections and like editing rounds and yeah, writing without like any like academic, like I didn't study writing, you know.
Right.
I don't know the rules. But yeah, so in the writing process, I love feedback from specific people. But back to like this book is really, it feels incredible when people like it, because I mean, when Zalika was talking, I was just like, yes, also same. In terms of just be like specificity can be universal. Like I can't remember exactly how you said it.
I love that quote. I want to take that away with me for sure.
Yeah, because I was nervous, and I told my friends I was nervous that like no one would get this, and it was weird. And it was just too much and too
right.
But people who are nothing like me like it, and then also people who are like me don't like it. It's like it's all good. But I love writing so much, and I want to just do it forever. So I'm down to adapt, right? So if it ever comes to a point in my writing, and if it's like beneficial to my craft, I'll basically do whatever is beneficial to my craft. So if that means listening to the feedback of someone whose opinion I don't necessarily respect for my work, I'll do it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm recognizing the time because it doesn't stand still when you're having such a delicious conversation. So I'm seeing a few questions come on the chat, and there's one that seems to have a particular theme. So let me choose one of these themes, which is with respect to when it comes to writing, how can all of you plant the seeds for the next generation to become writers? So I think someone's asking specifically about children as well. How can children be inspired to become writers?
I want to share on this one because there was also a question about how can parents encourage kids to write at home. And I think I have an 11-year-old who's almost 12. And I think one of the things to understand is that storytelling is natural. We tell stories all the time, across the dinner table, after school, et cetera, et cetera. Writing is not. Writing is a whole other practice of taking stories and putting them on the page and then shaping them into something. And so I think at the very earliest stages, and I know a lot of Indigenous authors talk about how like they're encouraged at like 2 years old to stand in front of the family and like tell a story. And that storytelling is built in early. I think one of the things I would say for the next generation is to just really encourage the telling of stories and the sharing of stories both ways, to a child and from a child, to a young person and from a young person, and providing those opportunities. And then when it comes to writing, I think you have to figure out what that individual needs and wants. My son struggles with writing by hand, and he's not very fast at typing. But one of the things we did with online learning is he would do his storytelling exercises. I would type for him. So he would tell me the stories and I would type exactly what he said. And then he could go back in and edit and make it better and fix it and move it around. But that initial work of getting the story on the page, which can often be a hurdle, especially for a young child. What do I say? How do I say it? Where do I start? Just letting them start and doing the writing portion for them. That was a really big barrier that helped him write more and create more stories. And so I think just recognizing that story and that writing isn't just what comes on the page, that writing is a storytelling exercise, and that we do it all the time and we can do it better and better if we practice it often, can lead kids closer. And then having them read a lot of writers from different communities and different backgrounds helps them understand that their stories are valuable and can be written and turned into books as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I know that I have all of 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to pick and choose what is it that I still want to hear from you about. And then I want to, before we wrap up, hear about other, projects or initiatives that you're working on. But I want to ask you this specific question, kind of leads off of what you were just talking about, Jael, which is about some of the work that we do with girls and gender non-binary youth, primarily between the age of 9 to 13. And it's a big part of the programs that, a big part of the programs, I should say, is about supporting their voices, supporting them to actually understand their identities, their communities, to really understand what their strengths are. And so I'm curious about when you reflect on your own preteen years, which, not that long ago compared to me, and how you've come along the way, what really helped you and to actually become writers today.
Well, for me, I had a really great support in my mother. She recognized that I love to write, and I started off writing poetry, and then I went to song lyrics and things like that. So she would get me things like a rhyming dictionary, so I could just find things and so it could help the process. And because I thought I was going to be a songwriter for a very long time, even though I hated it, she was like, "You have to learn how to play an instrument, so you're going to play the piano." So she really encouraged me and really helped me with my craft in terms of just getting me to write. And she also reading was a very big part of my growing up. And so she exposed me to books that I wouldn't have read in school, like Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid is a very dear book to me because it was the first book I remember with a Black girl protagonist. And she had a very extensive bookshelf. So I remember I grew up reading Beloved by Toni Morrison because I would just pick books off of her shelf and read it. And she would encourage that. And we'd have a conversation about what I was reading. So she really honed my love for writing and my love for reading by just being super encouraging about it.
That's amazing. What a supporter. She really got to know who you were and what you were interested in and just really helped you to generate it. That's incredible.
Yeah.
How about you, Jael?
I am quite the opposite, actually. I was listening to this, I'm like, that's so lovely.
I know.
I grew up reading, I come from a very strong Christian family, so we were going to church a lot, and I was reading a lot of Christian novels in my early years. And, I always joke around, I was reading Confederate romance novels, sad but true. And so not surprisingly, I went into high school deeply confused about a lot of things about myself in particular. And it wasn't until I was much older, university actually, where I met, Dion Brand, and I met Lorena Gale and Janet Sears. And these were authors that I started to read much later. And so what I would say, or when I think about girls and non-binary kids, I just think a lot about what I would say to them, just keep a journal, write things down, and really pay attention to what you're looking at and what you're watching and how that's affecting how you see yourself in the mirror. I think it's really important to protect the way we see ourselves. And I think the images come early and hard, especially for young Black girls and non-binary kids. I think it comes early when you start to see and feel yourself as being different and see yourself as being not enough. And writing and reading can really help you combat that. It really can. And it can help you bring in things that help reshape your thinking or reinforce what you already know and believe about yourself that's good. And then the writing can help you spit out the things that don't belong inside you, that are not good for you to be thinking about and stewing on.
I love the fact that you said that writing can actually help reshape some of those things and images, because that's an active thing. That's an act of empowerment. And
I think you have to recognize we have to be actively doing that, because if you just naturally think your kids are just gonna have a really positive view about themselves as Black kids in the world, I think we're fooling ourselves. Like I saw early on with my son, not so much the same things I went through, but I saw his understanding of girls, white girls and black girls, shaping really early. And I was like, let's deal with that right away.
Interrupt it. The projects that you're involved in, and sorry for jumping, but I know you all have brilliant answers to everything I would throw at you, but time is of the essence. So I know, for example, that Eternity, you received the Joe Burke for Social Justice reporting that will be looking at Ontario's justice system and its impact on Black and racialized jurors and defendants. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in a minute or less?
Thank you. Okay, so in 2018, I was on jury duty, and I was the only Black person on jury duty. And just being in that system, it really just shook me to understand the pitfalls of jury duty, of Black defendants and Black jurors, and the lack of them. So what I want to be doing, and this will probably be book 2, but I will be doing a lot of reporting on what it means to be a Black juror, who is selected for jury duty, who isn't. I think a lot of Canadians don't even understand how jury duty works, but also looking at the ways that we form juries and the ways that Black jurors are kept out by socioeconomic reasons, for not owning property. There are all these little factors that contribute to the reasons why Black jurors are not there. And so I'm currently working on that. My first piece will be out in, I think, April or so. So I'm excited.
Where will we find it?
So you will find it on hopefully the West End Phoenix website, but it will also be the West End Phoenix paper, and then a book near you after the pandemic, because I want a book tour.
That's excellent. Now, I can't let us end without Zalika. You are chairing the 2021 Scotiabank Gilder Prize jury. Like, hello. Can you tell us more about that role and what it means to you to be taking that on?
I'm still processing it. That's the thing when things like this happen. It takes me like a legitimate year to. You
only have a year.
It's happening, but I definitely take the role seriously. I definitely recognize that it's a really important position, and I'm just I'm very excited to be able to be a part of that. That's all I can really say right now, just because I'm still so like it's coming.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your work in that. And then Francesca, I mean, you're authors, you're just incredible woman, but your lives are just filled. So you are a multidisciplinary artist who has also produced short docs. A short doc called Black and Belonging, which has screened at film festivals in Halifax, Toronto, Montreal. Like, what else are you doing? Do you have time for this? But that's incredible. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, filmmaker is a big word. I started this photography project in 2016 after grad school. I still live in Halifax, but I couldn't find the Black people off campus, even though Nova Scotia has an incredible long-standing Black community. And I was like, where are they? How can I, find my way in? So I started photographing Black people and having conversations about belonging, and so Black people from here and Black people from elsewhere, like myself. And then I had an opportunity through a friend, actually my friend Shaya Ishak, incredible artist, had a residency at an artist run center in Halifax, and she invited me to show my work. So I turned it to video interviews, and I loved it so much. And I was like, I want to do this. And so I just got a filmmaker's assistant program grant from the NFB and the Fabienne Kola Foundation. They do Being Black in Canada. So through those opportunities, I got post-production support to make a proper short doc, not just YouTube videos, which is what I had been doing before. And I loved it. I am so eager to I love stories. I completely agree with Jael. I think storytelling is very much our birthright. It's the most natural thing from what I've seen in my life. So any medium to tell a story is what I'm interested in. right now I'm trying to be present to this moment because I feel like everything's happening so quickly. And I'm like, oh yes, I do have a book. Wow, like a literal childhood dream has come true. So I'm trying to be present to the moment and writing and trying to just be disciplined and consistent with like finishing some stories that I've started. Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll just add filmmaker to the list. and Jael, you want to tell us about Fold, because you're also an artistic director.
Yes.
Yeah.
So founder and now executive director of Fold, and so Fold's happening this May 1st to 15th. Actually, some of the women on this group are here. We haven't been able to get Zalika yet, but 1 year we will have her. We've tried, but I really love the work that we're doing there at Fold. We're going to have a really new virtual space that's going to be really exciting, and so I'm looking forward to that. In terms of my professional life. And, a lot of people have been asking about Gutter Child, what's next? And I am working on a sequel. So those are the things.
Wow. I just heard the word sequel. Well, you're all so awesome. We could keep talking for such a long time. And I'm just so honored, really, to have had the opportunity to actually have this conversation, to have it at this time, to have it with each of you, to have consumed your writing, because I feel as if that's exactly what I've been able to do in order to have a conversation that was meaningful and authentic. So thank you for that opportunity. I am in awe of you, all of you. And thank you for reflecting me in all of your writing, because I feel as if there is a place in there for me, not in every instant, but certainly a place that where I was reflected, and that like me and other Black folks, Black women, to actually be seen. That means a whole lot, and it would. When in my years growing up as a child here in Toronto, it would have meant the world to me. I think my first exposure to the arts and Black folks, other than being in TV and the movies, was a play that was put on at my school called Young, Gifted, and Black. And I have never forgotten it to this day, because it left an imprint on me. And that's the beauty and importance of the work that you're doing. So keep it going, please. It means everything. So I'm going to just tell our audience, if you're still hanging in there with us, that this is an opportunity for you to read some incredible works by these awesome authors. And it's an opportunity to also acknowledge that this is indeed Black History Month, but that these works are available right throughout the year. You can actually celebrate and support Black authors every day. So tell your family and friends about their work so that they can also learn about it. And also remember to visit our website, CanadianWoman.org, Tireless Readers Collective. That's where we are featuring all kinds of authors. And so also enter to win their books. And as we're coming up to International Women's Day, we're asking everyone to actually make moves for gender justice this March. International Women's Day is on March 8th. And more than ever, we all need to take action on issues of gender justice. So sign, watch, click, give, everything that you need to do. It's the only way that we can actually all together move forward to a gender justice society and actually have critical change that we need. Please go to our website, CanadianWoman.org, learn how you can take action today. And thank you for joining us.